I'm already an emotional pack mule on the side, so that is off the table as a secondary career option.
Welcome to Keep It Fictional, a weekly podcast for book lovers by book lovers. Build your to-be-read list with Sadie, Liz, Virginia, Fiona, and Corrine from the Port Moody Public Library. Warning, this podcast contains strong opinions and may cause an increase in your library holds list.
Hello, listeners, and welcome back to another episode of Keep It Fictional, a book podcast for book lovers by book lovers from the Port Moody Public Library. Earlier this year, you heard two of us share books about dragons in celebration of the Year of the Dragon. Whether you identify with the traits that match your zodiac animal or not, every one of us has one, and you can learn a little bit about personalities from studying them. For example, those born in the Year of the Dragon tend to be ambitious, confident, and charismatic. Talking about the Year of the Dragon got us thinking that it might be fun to do an episode on a similar theme where each of us reads a book that matches the traits of our zodiac. So for this week, we all read a book that corresponds with our star sign. Now, I understand that not everyone buys into star signs, and that's totally okay. Not everyone of the same sign is exactly the same, and not every sign matches every person. Each one of us is still unique, even among those who share our sign. But for the purpose of choosing a book for this week's episode, each of us dove into the traits and stereotypes of our signs, and we chose books that we felt matched those traits. Some may have chosen books that were written by someone who shares their sign, while others chose books that simply matched the vibe of their sign. We got lucky that every book friend present today has a different star sign, so you will hear many different types of book recommendations today. I am your host, Emma, and I'm a Gemini. And I am joined by my book friend, Sadie, who's an Aries, Virginia, who's a Pisces, Corrine, who is a Scorpio, and Liz is back representing the Cancers. So we're actually going to go in the order of the zodiac today. So we're going to start with Sadie, who is an Aries. And Sadie, I'm just curious to know, do you identify with your star sign or do you buy into star signs at all?
I'd say that when I was younger, I got into star signs, but I was a big believer that you read your horoscope the day after the day that it tells you and see how accurate it actually was. So I don't know if that means that I didn't fully buy into star signs even then, but I did like to look into them a little bit. I always joke that I grew up with an Aries as a sister, and she out-Aries'd me in every single way. And so I don't think that I do match a lot of the Aries characteristics. I'm not really that hot-headed. I am not that impatient or impulsive. I don't anger easily. Yeah, I have pretty good self-control. So I don't think that I necessarily match a lot of the Aries characteristics. That being said, if you talk to my husband, he might disagree. He does say that I'm one of the most stubborn people that he knows. And so maybe my Aries characteristics come out in different parts of my life. Definitely, I don't think at work I represent a true Aries, but that's okay. So for my book today, I read a book about somebody who does represent a true Aries. Independent, hot-headed, unafraid of conflict, highly competitive, high energy and ambitious, impatient and impulsive, sometimes lacking self-control and reacting out of emotion rather than calmly or with a clear head. So these are some of the traits that an Aries typically has, and these are many of the traits that the protagonist of my book has. But I will get to that in a moment. For now, I want to tell you a story. It is a story about a middle-aged, single mother with bad knees. Her name is Amina, and she lives in the middle of the jungle with her 10-year-old daughter, Mariana, her mother, her brother, his toddler son, and his very pregnant wife. She keeps a modest house and keeps to herself, spending her days praying, trying to fix her roof that is riddled with holes, and doing her best to keep her family safe. And apart from the roof fixing, which is going horribly, she's doing a pretty good job of the other two. That is, until she has an unexpected visitor. A very wealthy woman named Lady Salima from the city of Aden approaches her home. She's looking for the pirate queen, Amina al-Sirafi, the most famous Nakuda or captain in decades. Salima knows that she has retired and did so 10 years ago and that no one has seen her since then. But this brave, bold woman who seems to not fear death itself and who is rumored to even have married a demon is the only one who can help her. Lady Salima's granddaughter Dunya has been kidnapped by a cruel Frankish warrior named Falco, who has conquered and killed his way across the Indian Ocean. If Amina al-Sirafi can just bring Dunya home, then Salima will give her riches which she has never even dreamed of. Riches that would allow her to finally keep her family safe for good. But our middle-aged, bad need Amina would have to actually be this pirate queen, which Amina assures Salima she is not. However, when Salima mentions that her son Asif was once a crew member on the Nakuda's ship, the Marawati, Amina finds herself faced with a past that she had left behind 10 years earlier. For Asif was in fact her crew member, and Amina was his captain, and the greatest pirate queen in decades. Until she betrayed her entire crew and lost Asif his life. Before she had her daughter and retired from a life of piracy to live her quiet, albeit dull, life in the country. It is perhaps the guilt over Asif more than the riches she has been promised, and possibly a heavy dose of stubborn ambition and impulsiveness that finally makes Amina admit her true identity and accept Salima's offer. So Amina leaves her daughter and her family behind to go in search of her ship, which she has left in the hands of her old first mate Tinbu, making a brief stop to pick up another crewmate and poison expert Delilah, who is not too pleased to be hearing from the captain after no word for almost 10 years. Really, she thought they were friends. However, when Amina mentions Falco to her, Delilah surprises her by saying that he has actually tried to reach her already. For reasons neither of them know. The two continue their journey onto Aden, where they plan to collect the Marawati from Tinbu and meet up with Salima to get more details on Dunya. However, they arrive in Aden just in time to see Tinbu arrested for piracy, his whole crew put in jail to await execution, and the Marawati held by the governor. Now, Amina is not the kind of person to give up. It's that hot-headed, unafraid of conflict, lacking self-control part of her personality. So disguising themselves and using one of Delilah's favorite knockout brews, they break Tinbu and his crew out of prison, retake their ship, blow up a couple of the governor's warships in the process, and sail out into the Indian Ocean in search of Dunya. Amina finds that while she misses her daughter with her whole heart and body and being, she has also missed the sea, missed her ship, missed the freedom and excitement and adventure that she left behind. She grew up on a ship. It is a part of herself that she'll never forget. And hey, if there's just a little bit of thieving or fighting or other piratey things along the way, well, that is just bonus. And then she learns more about who they are actually chasing. Falco, who is not only rumored to be interested in the occult, but seems to actually be versed in it, evidenced by his former agent magically choking on a bag of gold after giving up his secrets to Amina and Tinbu. She also begins to learn about the secrets that Salima has kept from her surrounding Dunya's disappearance, which may have been more voluntary than Amina was led to believe. Salima, too, has been keeping from her the reason that Falco approached her family to begin with, the Moon of Saba, an ancient pearl that is said to be enchanted by a moon spirit and able to grant the finder unimaginable power. Amina has heard of the Moon of Saba and knows that she wants no part of it. And so she tells her crew that their journey is over. They're going home. But when Amina tells Salima of her decision to call off her search, she's faced with a brutal choice. For Salima has also done her research. And as a wealthy woman, she has power. Power that could hurt Amina's family, could hurt Amina's daughter. And if Amina does not continue her search for Dunya, Salima promises she will never see Mariana again. So with no choice but to continue, Amina realizes that she is once again bringing her crew and her family towards dangers they may not make it home from, including a murderous, magic-obsessed warrior, horrible mercenaries who have been gifted unbelievable powers and abilities, giant sea creatures who can bite a ship cleanly in two, and Amina's own ex-husband, a demon known as Raksh, who is responsible for the horrors she inflicted upon her crew 10 years earlier, who she thought she had killed 10 years ago, and who is, unbeknownst to him, the father of Amina's daughter. Amina is not sure if this is adventure she was finally not going to make it home from, but there's one thing she does know. She will not go down without a fight. This is The Adventures of Amina al-Sirafi by Shannon Chakraborty. It is a lot of fun. It's a lot of action. It's a lot of adventure. Chakraborty is best known for her Devabad series, the first book, which is City of Brass. Be completely honest with you, I have actually tried to read that series a bunch of times, and I could not get into the first book. I know. After reading this, though, I'm going to try again. I am going to try again because I enjoyed this one. And so I think that if I could just persevere through the first little bit that's stopping me for some reason, then I will get through it. So I'm going to try again. I promise. So Amina is a very fun protagonist. She definitely has many of the Aries traits, which I mentioned at the beginning. She loves a good adventure. One time she was a truly gifted and fierce pirate, but she is certainly impulsive and hot-headed and acts with her emotions instead of her brain. And this quite often gets her into a lot of trouble. I really liked the humorous juxtaposition that Chakraborty adds into the book by placing most of our main characters past middle age and giving them ailments they are now kind of needing to deal with, such as bad knees and poor sight, while they're also being chased by murderous magic-wielding warriors. The book is written as an account of Amina's adventures as she is relaying them to a scribe known as Jamal. We don't know too much about Jamal, but she does occasionally speak directly to them, asking them if they want her to continue, ensuring that they are writing a true and accurate account of what happened and not adding their own kind of personal opinions into the matter. It reads very much like the swashbuckling adventure that I think Chakraborty was intending to write, but it does have a few deeper additions to the stories and the characters. Amina is quite a devout Muslim, and parts of the book are spent talking about the religion and explaining her connection to it. However, on her crew, there are members who practice many religions and no religion, and they are all welcomed by Amina and her friends. There are also queer and trans characters amongst her crew who are also equally welcomed. It is a long book at almost 500 pages, but it does read pretty quickly, especially when the main action is taking place. It takes place in kind of a post-Crusades Middle Ages time period around Yemen, Oman, and Somalia, which is a time period and a part of the world that I have to admit I don't know very much about. So it was really interesting to kind of be immersed in that world and learn more about it and its people. So I would say that if you're an Aries and enjoy reading about Aries characteristic, now that I say that, maybe that's where my Aries traits come out, is I do read a lot of books that have this kind of protagonist. So maybe that is the nod to me being an Aries. But yes, if you enjoy kind of an action-filled pirate adventure with a snarky, hot-headed pirate queen protagonist and some dark magic thrown in for good measure, then I think that this is definitely the book for you. This is The Adventures of Amina al-Sirafi by Shannon Chakraborty.
Thank you so much, Sadie. I do think that of all of us, you may have had the easiest job picking out a book that fit your star sign. Because look at any kind of badass female protagonist, any assassin narrative, and it's going to have these Aries vibes to it. But that did sound like a very, very Aries book. So thank you so much for sharing that. Since we're going in the order of the zodiac, I'm actually going next since I am a Gemini. And for my book for this week, I went more for something that had kind of the Gemini vibes in it, especially since the author of my book is actually a Capricorn. I had to do a lot of internet digging to figure that out. But I wanted something with a character or a narrator who was kind of simultaneously charismatic, but also a little bit neurotic, as many Geminis are. For example, some famous Geminis include Kanye West and Donald Trump, if that explains a little bit to you. I wanted something kind of with a smart and witty narrative, but not without depth to it. And I had recently read the book Everyone in This Room Will Someday Be Dead by Emily Austen. And I found that her quippy and witty writing style really matched the Gemini energy that I was looking for. So for this week, I read her second novel, which is called Interesting Facts About Space. And in my opinion, even the title kind of emits Gemini energy. Geminis are often like on the hunt for a new interest or a new hyperfixation and are thus kind of always loaded with these silly little facts that they're ready to give at a moment's notice. So this is interesting facts about space. In this book, we have Enid. She is 26 years old. She's half deaf, a lesbian, and an information architect for the space agency. She is also obsessed with true crime podcasts. Enid is charismatic and a good judge of character. Other characters in the book trust her judgment and are drawn to her, but she doesn't always allow herself to believe them when they tell her as much. One of her coworkers named Vin, she keeps him at a distance, despite the fact that Vin considers her one of his closest and most trusted friends. And she doesn't allow herself to get close to her half-sisters, who she only met after their shared father passed away. Early in the book, Enid attends a gender reveal party for one of her half-sisters named Edna, which is confusing, Enid and Edna, much to Enid's own displeasure, given that she's queer going to a gender reveal party. And at this party, Enid is committed to playing the role of well-mannered heterosexual distant relative, a role that she hasn't quite mastered yet. She's mastered enigmatic temporary love interest. She's mastered reliable employee, mother's aidful daughter, and unobjectionable patron at a store or restaurant. But she's yet to master sister to the daughters of the woman who my father left my mother for. So Enid's father left when she was 6, and she didn't meet her half-sisters until his funeral. A funeral where now, as an adult, Enid has to sit there listening to stories of a perfect, loving father who will be deeply missed by his 2 daughters. Stories that completely neglect the existence of a third daughter. When Enid finds herself in uncomfortable or anxiety-inducing situations, like sitting at her sister's gender reveal party, she texts her mom interesting facts about space. Like, did you know that sunsets on Mars are blue? Or a day on Venus is longer than a year on Venus. Other coping mechanisms Enid exhibits when things get tough for her are spiraling down a rabbit hole of true crime podcasts, or the old reliable running away from your problems rather than confronting them. Enid is observant, but she's also deeply paranoid. She has an irrational fear of bald men, and she begins to believe that one is following her. She finds evidence that someone has broken into her apartment, and she repeatedly sees what she believes to be the face of a bald man in her window, staring at her. She starts avoiding a bald coworker she's supposed to be working on a project with. She stops seeing her doctor when she's assigned a new one who is bald. And she opts to break into her own ground level apartment through the window rather than walk in through the front door out of fear that she might run into her bald neighbor. To us as readers, the problems that Enid faces are hilarious and unhinged, but to her, they are deeply real. As her paranoia about being stalked escalates, her other fears and insecurities gradually expose themselves. Enid is afraid of being alone with her own thoughts, so she constantly drowns them out with true crime podcasts, which many people around her believe is only making her paranoia worse. She is afraid of being misunderstood or of offending people on accident, something that happens pretty often to her due to being fully deaf in one ear, so she's half deaf. She doesn't always hear people when they say, "Excuse me," or they ask her a question on her deaf side, and that often gets people really frustrated with her when she doesn't really know what's going on. She carries so much self-hatred that she watches these old YouTube videos of herself that she posted as a child and a teenager. Videos where she tries on outfits and makeup and talks about the kids that bully her at school or her opinions on SpongeBob SquarePants. She reads the comments where people insult her, and she calls it her own form of self-harm. Enid's mother is mentally ill, and Enid has spent most of her life caring for her mother's mental illness at the expense of taking care of her own. Her fear of letting people get close to her is also evident in her relationships with women. She's never been in a committed relationship. Instead, she casually dates and hooks up with people that she meets on dating apps, some of whom are married, unbeknownst to Enid before they meet. And all of these problems that Enid faces in her life, her failed romantic relationships, her strained relationship with her half-sisters, her extreme avoidance of all bald men that she encounters, her fear that she's being stalked, they all build simultaneously throughout the book until they finally come to a head. And Enid finally must contend with her growing suspicion that something is seriously wrong with her, because the only thing she can't outrun is herself. So I really love Emily Austen's writing style. I really, really enjoyed her first book. I loved Everyone in This Room Will Someday Be Dead. But I actually think I liked this one more. This one was like deeply unhinged in like a really funny way that I thoroughly enjoyed. I would describe it as a page turner about nothing. I think Emily Austen has this uncanny ability to write really, really interesting books that are extremely mundane and don't really have a lot of plot points to hit throughout them. It's got this like gripping and very realistic writing style. She uses a lot of dark humor and irony and subtle humor in kind of mundane experiences. Like the book opens with Enid checking out at a grocery store, and the cashier is like, "Would you like a bag with that?" And Enid's listening to her podcast where it's like the teenager's body was found dead in the basement. And so it's like these little mundane moments that are kind of balanced with this dark humor that makes the writing really funny and really interesting. I also think Emily Austen is really good at writing unique and realistic relationships. None of the love interests in her book are typical love interests, but they're very authentic and real people. So she doesn't incorporate kind of the typical romance tropes that you would see, but there's definitely still kind of romantic subplots that happen throughout them, which I thought was really fun to read. I think this book is a Gemini book because it is extremely funny, but it also uses humor to shield some of the much darker themes of paranoia and mental illness that are going on in Enid's life. Geminis are often very funny, but they also use humor as a crutch to avoid more serious conversations. Enid is also very perceptive and analytical, like a Gemini, but that kind of bites her in the butt when her perceptions of people around her become paranoia, when they just continue to build and spiral. Geminis are very versatile. They can adapt to any room that they're in, which Enid admits to doing. She admits to masking, but sometimes she's not able to fulfill the roles that she wants to. She fulfills these roles that people expect of her, but she never feels like she can truly be her authentic self. She's afraid of being alone. She's deeply afraid of being alone inside her own mind with her own thoughts, something that becomes clearer the deeper that she falls into her spiral. And she overstimulates herself with this true crime content at all times to avoid being alone with her own thoughts. Geminis are kind of famous for being conflict avoidant, for running away from their own problems rather than confronting them, which I would describe is probably the major contributing conflict to the book. This book kind of reads like being inside the mind of a Gemini. It's fast paced, it's witty, it's funny, but it's also very mistrusting and paranoid. So if any of that sounds fun to you, or if you want to hear some cool facts about space, because this book is definitely loaded with them, then I highly recommend that you check out Interesting Facts About Space from Emily Austen. And next, I think let's hear from Liz first, and then we'll jump into our existential question. So Liz is a Cancer, the next sign in the zodiac after Gemini. And what do you have for us today, Liz?
Well, the book that I picked today, I think, really suits the stereotypical Cancerian profile to a T. I'll get into why. But for those of you who don't know the traits that are generally associated with people born under the sign of Cancer, it's said that Cancerians tend to be sensitive, that we seek out comfort. Some are even called homebodies. We have a very long memory for emotional events. And while we may forgive you, we will never, ever, ever forget. We have boundaries that often get pushed a lot, and we can take that pushing a lot and take on other people's problems and emotions. But when the day comes where we've had enough, then we are done with you. That is it. So in a nutshell, a lot of push and pull with emotions and feelings, as Cancerians are tied to the moon and its cycles, just like the ebbing in and out of the tides. All right, now on to this book. Today I want to talk about The Traveling Cat Chronicles by Hiro Arikawa. And it was translated from the Japanese into English by Philip Gabriel, whose name may be familiar to you as one of the principal translators for the author Haruki Murakami. The cover is beautiful. Cat on the cover, calming colors, fall leaves. That speaks to my cozy sensibilities. In Traveling Cat Chronicles, we meet Satoru, who is a lifelong cat lover. And he meets Nana, the cat, after he finds her sleeping on the hood of his van. With some chicken and some gentle encouragement, Nana enters Satoru's home and his heart. Fast forward 5 years, and this is a very bonded pair. And one day they are going on a road trip. in that same van throughout Japan. So in this book, there's beautiful descriptions about the scenery that they encounter. And even Nana, as your stereotypical can't impress me kind of a cat, is marveling at this scenery around them and thinking, wow, what a beautiful place this is. Now, what they're doing is visiting old friends from Satoru's past. And at each stop, we meet the friends, we learn about Satoru's relationship with these people, why he knows them, what history they have, but also more about Satoru himself. And although we have found him throughout the story to be a generally cheerful person, we do learn that his youth was not without struggle. And we learn about the role that these people played in his life. Now, these visits are not just to catch up or reminisce, however. Satoru is trying to determine which of his good friends would be best suited to provide Nana with a new home. Now, the reason for this is not made clear to the reader at first, or to Nana even, but because of their bond and because of what we know of Satoru's character, we realize that there must be something very important behind what must be a very difficult decision. In this book, we learn what people can do in the face of adversity and pain, how we can push through our own difficulties and choose to be kind, and realize that how our actions today can have an impact on another's future. And that can kind of be our legacy, but also, ensuring the happiness of those we care about the most. So this is a book where I can't really tell you too much about it because I don't really want to tell you why this is happening. That's because that's part of what packs an emotional punch. So not surprisingly, the Traveling Cat Chronicles really was a book that I took to heart as a reader, but also I suppose as a Cancerian, if you believe in the traits of the star signs. This book was a tearjerker. As a Cancerian, supposedly I cry very easily. I think I do. But from a lot of reviews that I read, I wanted to know sort of what other people had thought about the book. Like, is it just me? But even people who don't normally cry over books have said that this really got them. The story and the characters are both heartwarming and heartbreaking at the same time. It evoked all the feels for me. And at the end of it, it left me a bit gutted, but still hopeful. Put me through the emotional ringer, and it nudged my sensitive Cancerian soul in the best possible way. We love to feel things, all the feelings, whether they're sad or happy. We love to feel things. So I think anybody who likes cozy books that still have some emotional depth to them, to the story, to the characters, may enjoy this. Of course, cat lovers, animal lovers, and those of you who enjoy sentimental stories. Now, if you're not sure if book format is right for you for this one, this was also made into a movie, which I happened to stumble upon while I was on a plane. So, of course, in a plane surrounded by people I don't know, I decided to watch this movie. And yes, the movie also made me cry. So if you're feeling up for that, a cozy, comforting book, and maybe getting some tears out, I do recommend The Traveling Cat Chronicles by Hiro Arikawa.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Liz. I love a cozy, like kind of fall cat themed book. So that sounds perfect. And love a good cry. So that sounds really nice. I think next we will do our existential question. So in lieu of doing a regular existential question today, I warned my book friends ahead of time that we'll do something a little bit different while collecting information about each sign to send to my book friends so that they could choose their books. I went to the website CoStar, which is a popular astrology app where you can learn more about your sign and compare your birth chart with friends. And CoStar has pages with like general information about each star sign. And these pages include traits, famous people with your sign, and a funny little section called Best Careers. So for our existential question today, I wanted to know which of these careers my book friends would choose for their sign. Sadie, your career options as an Aries are stunt double, part-time punk, pro wrestler, petty thief, or cereal box mascot. Which Aries career would you choose?
I'm tempted to say part-time punk just because I have no idea what exactly that entails and how you monetize that as a career. But I was drawn to stunt double first. I think I was telling you, Emma, yesterday that one of my heroes and the person I want to be when I grow up is Jessie Graff, who is a stunt double and one of the most successful women on American Ninja Warrior. She is awesome and I want to be her. And so I would definitely pick stunt double. And then I would also pick petty thief because I could build my way up. I could get to a point where I was running full scale heists. And I think that I would be very successful and it would be a lot of fun to do that.
Awesome. I also think that you could choose part-time punk in addition to one of those other, like maybe more financially stable options. Because if you could make a full-time wage as a stunt double and or a petty thief, then you could also be a part-time punk.
It does say part-time, you're right. So I could just do that as well as any of them.
Awesome. Thank you so much for humoring me. Next, we have Virginia. And I know Virginia has already chosen her job. We all know what Virginia's job is, but I will read them all so that our listeners can know, as a Pisces, what their job options are. So for Pisces, you have volunteer therapist, amateur poet, curbside fortune teller, sad clown, orb of light, or vapor. Just vapor. All right, Virginia, tell the listeners.
Well, I've been saying this ever since I discovered that it's a possible alternative career. I've been saying to everybody at least once a day that I am going to be absolutely the sad clown. That is I'm thinking about how I can change career right now because I would love to be a sad clown. I think my second choice, because sad clown is so awesome, I cannot not choose it, but my second choice is definitely be vapor. I would love to be vapor. That would be my other thing. I don't care about the money part of it. I'm just going to be vapor. If I can be, that would be great. So, I don't believe in horoscopes, but now maybe I need to. At least for that website, I'm going to follow everything that website said because it tells me that I can be a sad clown.
CoStar does have some good jokes on it.
If you need to know where to train to be a sad clown, I actually have some resources for you, Virginia.
I am a sad clown. I don't need to be training.
See, I know Sadie said earlier that she doesn't identify with being an Aries, but I think having a background in theater is very much an Aries trait. Got kind of that passion. I don't know. I think of fire signs when I think of people that were in theater, but that's just me. All right, Karine, you're up next. So your options as a Scorpio are con artist, puppet master, brooding protagonist, poltergeist, or cult leader. And I just have to say, I think Scorpio got the best career options. I think these are all excellent.
See, these are legitimate career options, unlike some of them, except for being a poltergeist, because you're dead. That just means you're a ghost, and then you still have to work in the afterlife, which seems exhausting. So this is kind of a toss-up, but kind of very carefully weighing my options and having done research in both areas to really think about how I would want my day-to-day to go. I think con artist, because it's really easy. From what I read, it's almost embarrassingly easy to be a con artist. And cult leader, you have to be on call for a lot of people, and they're very needy and they're constantly wanting things from you. And you can't really shut it off unless you're communing with Xanadu. So I think I'm going to go with con artist because usually they also walk away from it, whereas cult leaders don't.
Yeah, I expected you to choose cult leader, but that's a great argument. That makes a lot of sense. All right, Liz. So as a Cancer, your options are emotional pack mule, caretaker for lost skaters. I don't know what type of skater, just says skaters. That one influential elementary school teacher, free hugs booth operator, or metaphorical heart surgeon.
I'm already an emotional pack mule on the side, so that is off the table as a secondary career option. I was thinking that one influential elementary school teacher, but if we're thinking of actually having a monetizable cost of living in Vancouver, I'd say metaphorical heart surgeon. Definitely.
Wonderful. And just for the sake of fairness, I have to go. So I'm a Gemini. The Gemini career options are likable politician, quirky side character, devil's advocate, bubblegum rapper joke writer, or Twitter personality. And I am firmly against being a Twitter personality. So that one is off the table. Likable politician sounds like I could make some money off of that, but I don't want to go into politics absolutely whatsoever. So I think if I could choose two, I would do devil's advocate just because I love to argue, and quirky side character because that just sounds fun. So those are the jobs that I would choose. Thank you guys so much for playing this silly little game with me. I had fun reading through all the different job options. I really just wanted to hear Virginia yell sad clown on the podcast, but I thank you all for playing that little game with me. Next in the zodiac, we have Scorpio. So Kareen, what Scorpio book do you have for us today? And do you identify with being a Scorpio?
I don't know what that means. I did kind of like go through the list of traits because, I wanted to really dedicate myself earnestly to the cause. And according to your co-star sites, Scorpios are psychological trap doors, which I don't know that I particularly understand. I've always seen kind of like the description of Scorpio being like very negative in that they are very secretive. They like to manipulate people. They're rather ruthless. They love power. The very kind of last bullet point that you made in the list that you sent to us is would make a great cult leader. So, I don't know that I particularly want to identify with all of those things. Yeah, most of them are pretty forthcoming, but also evasive, depending on which benefits them the most. Blunt, but not without tact. So I don't know. Sometimes, but aren't we all that? Am I doing a Scorpio thing right now? Perhaps I am. I reveal nothing. I commit to nothing. Yep. So there you go. I'm wriggly like a scorpion. So I am very excited because this topic gave me kind of like two of my like pet subjects to play with. I could either do cults or I could do con artists. And I decided to go with con artists because I found the perfect book for it that about 2 chapters in, I immediately just bought it because I'm like, I'm going to need to like refer to this in my day-to-day life. So in December 2016, on Instagram, hundreds of influencers, including Kendall Jenner, Bella Hadid, Emily Ratajkowski. These are people who I'm going to say the names for. I don't really know who they are, but that's fine. So hundreds of influencers posted orange squares with the mysterious hashtag of "Join me." This was the beginning of the viral marketing sensation of the Fire Festival, which promised 2 weekends of a transformative musical festival with only the most exclusive people going. They promised models, the Bahamas, a pig rose, exclusive models, beaches, geodesic domes, youth, sexy time. Did we mention the models? And music? Question mark. They promised an all-exclusive, amazing 2 weekends for 5,000 people, and it immediately sold out despite not actually having any headliners for aforementioned music festival. Now, if you were on the internet in and around April 2017, what a great time to be alive it was. When all of the reports coming from influencers and social media people started to hit about the real experience of the Fire Festival. And let me tell you, there were no geodesic domes. There were only like 3rd to 4th tier models. There was very little food, hardly enough bathrooms and or water, no acts, not even Blink-182. And it was an unmitigated disaster. Now, us on the internet at this time started pointing fingers and laughing. All of these people who wanted this amazing experience, who paid so much money for it to be exclusive, ended up having, sounds like a pretty bad time. But we might as well just be pointing our fingers at ourselves. They are not the only people who have fallen for something on the internet. And it's something that really anyone could do. We've all clicked a link because an influencer recommended a particular shake or hair care product or makeup or something that would change our life. We can point the fingers at ourselves, but we can absolutely point our fingers at Billy McFarland, the organizer of the festival itself, who is a walking red flag that Wikipedia describes as, and I quote, American businessmen whose enterprises have been characterized by fraud. And also, I quote, the poster boy for millennial scammers, who, according allegedly to some reports, squandered $27.4 million. Yeah. And it was laughably easy. So very easy. There was never really going to be a music festival, but there was the idea of a music festival. And lots of people fell for it, and they will keep falling for it. Hype, how scammers, grifters, and con artists are taking over the internet and why we're following by Gabrielle Bluestone is written by a journalist and licensed attorney who also executive produced the Netflix documentary, which is a great time. I think we all really enjoyed that. And the book dives deep into the Fire Festival. In fact, when it was put out in paperback, the entire book was rebranded, which I thought was very interesting. The paperback is actually just called Hype Inside the Fire Festival and the Golden Age of Grift, which I think is a more accurate reflection of what this book is, which is talking about social media scammers, influencers, brands, and celebrities that are using our own basic human instincts against us. It talks about the strange economy of Instagram and brands and influencers. And you know that I love a look at like a bizarre economy. I love the art world. I love the economics of the art world. And this is the economics of influence and brands. So paying people off to wear a certain piece of clothing or mention a certain thing, and how this is all manufactured to make it seem like it's organic. And we keep buying it because we want to belong. It also talks and goes in deep into kind of like the FOMO of investors. So looking in the case of Elizabeth Holmes, one of my favorite scams of all time, and Theranos, that supposedly very clever people with a tremendous amount of money kept investing despite all signs saying what she had was a box. All she had was a box. Nothing else. Just look at my very impressive box. And they kept giving her millions of dollars. The book delves into how social media can manufacture a personality as a brand. So people who have used this very successfully, Trump, who used social media as well as just the regular old media of The Apprentice to build himself into the paragon of the businessman through clever editing. It also goes into stories of influencers gone awry, like Carolyn Calloway, who very good drama there, who kept promising to write books about her influencer career and then just like didn't want to write them, and then tried workshops that ended up being nothing, and who eventually ended up on OnlyFans. It's a fascinating world. She kind of takes a look at the Fire Festival as a microcosm of the greater problems and loopholes with social media that are there to exploit our very incessant need to belong. So one of the people involved with, and I'm going to put this loosely, organizing the Fire Festival, said that this is essentially an opportunity for the average loser to live like a celebrity. And that's what we all want. We all want to be important and loved and popular. But we're not going to get that because we're people. And what they want is our money. And they're getting it. They're getting so much of it. So if you really enjoy the stories of con artists, but also want to kind of understand why. And I think that's a lot of all of us watching those fire documentaries, watching the Anna Delvey kind of documentary. We all are asking ourselves, why? And how? How is no one at no point saying, hey, he's never organized a musical festival or anything? And it's like 2 months before this is supposed to be happening, and there's no stage, and no one signed a contract. And this is on this weird island in the Bahamas. Like, there's not enough water there. Does anyone have any questions? Nope. Just throw some more models at it, and it'll all work out. Because, again, Billy McFarland has been allowed to fail up and up and up, and he will fail up again because that is our human nature. So if you're like me, a Scorpio who likes drama and secrets and con artists and like manipulation and puppet mastering behind the scenes, you should definitely pick up a copy of Hype.
I don't think you could have chosen a more Scorpio book for this topic. Thank you so much, Corinne. I've like somehow avoided any like learning about the Fire Festival up until this point. And I'm so glad I did because that was the great intro course. That was what I needed. I'm going to go home and watch the documentary. That was wonderful. And I appreciate that you mentioned that like Scorpios do kind of get a bad rap. I think the two signs that are like, I would say the doormats of the zodiac, the ones that kind of get the most crap from the other signs are Scorpios and Geminis a little bit. We are often called like two-faced and manipulative and like not trustworthy and all that. So I appreciate you bringing that up because not all Scorpios are bad. Not all Scorpios are manipulative. Although that book did kind of embody the Scorpio vibes we were looking for today.
I should say that Billy McFarlane is a Sagittarius because I looked that up for you.
Thank you so much for sharing. Awesome. We have one sign left, the last sign of the zodiac, the final sign in the cycle. So Virginia, representing the fish, representing the Pisces, what book do you have for us today?
Pisces are delusional. That's the first thing that Emma said to me when she found out that I am a Pisces. And I don't think she meant it that I am delusional, but Emma also probably doesn't know me very well. So yeah. And then, of course, when she sent me the site to co-stars and she said, oh, look at all the ridiculous things that they said about Pisces. You know, you're the least Pisces. So all the Pisces I know. Again, Emma, you probably don't know me yet because aside from the fact that co-stars said that I could be a sad clown, I read the list of the characteristics. I'm like, they are not wrong. They are not wrong at all. So what is a Pisces? I feel like out of all us, maybe other than like maybe me and Liz probably feels like we identify with our sign the most because Pisces are prone to fantasizing. I think that's the biggest thing. Or as Emma put it, we're delusional. We totally are. In our head, we can build up this reality that is more true and more believable than the actual reality. Is it based on facts? Who cares? It's what we have in our head, and that is what we believe in. In addition, we also think that everything is a sign. So we see something that someone might think is just like something that happens, is totally neutral, or like there's like nothing attached to it. We will attach so many feelings to some very, very simple action of someone else or someone's like even just like if they don't text you back right away, I'll just be like, oh, did I say something? Maybe like, they're mad at me. Now they don't want to talk to me anymore. Everything is a sign. It's interesting because when I was looking up who is a Pisces, I discovered that because one of the things that we could do is to read a book by an author who is also a Pisces. I discovered to my absolute delight that Kobo Abe is a Pisces, in addition to Akutagawa. And I remember when I talk about Kobo Abe, I read a quote from his story, and he said, just because I imagine it doesn't mean I shouldn't give it weight. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, someone totally understands me because that is exactly how I think Pisces thinking goes, is that like, it doesn't matter if it's real or not. Like, it is like sort of the most important thing that we believe in. I feel so seen in his books, I think partly because of that. I think the other thing, similar to Liz, Pisces are also supposed to be like really sensitive. And I feel like Liz is probably the good kind of sensitive. Ours is probably the delusional kind of sensitive in the sense that like we just see things that are not there and we are very, very much attuned to like how people feel. And we're very overly concerned about like, are people okay? We worry about them and we usually feel sadder than them if they are sad because again, there's no boundaries between a Pisces and the world. We basically just swim in it and we enjoy like just being immersed in the emotions of everybody else. So if they feel sad, guarantee you that I feel sadder than you are, even though it's not me who's the sad person. So that is how I think a Pisces feel. And so I was all set to do a Kobo Abe book and I read one, but I just felt like it didn't quite embody those Pisces characteristics. It doesn't help that I didn't really understand the book very well. So I'm going to talk about something else that when I read it just a few weeks ago, and this was after like we were told that we're going to do this star sign episode. I'm like, that is such a Pisces book. So I went with the story of 50-year-old Jonathan Noel. Jonathan is very happy, very content about the stability and the tranquility that he feels his life has. He feels that the routine, he got it all down, is perfect. It is exactly what he wants in his life, a state of uneventfulness. That is what he hoped to maintain every single day. Some bad stuff has happened to Jonathan earlier in his life, which leads him to conclude that the best thing to do is to keep that right amount of distance. And that includes people and that includes things. If you don't have them, you can't lose them. And so he never really felt the need to own anything. He doesn't feel the need to talk to anybody. He's just happy where he is. Having moved to Paris 30 years ago, he has lived in the same tiny little room that he has lived in all his time in Paris. It's kind of like in a part of an apartment complex kind of thing. It doesn't even have its own bathroom. And you have to share that one with everybody who lives on the floor. But to Jonathan, it is just perfect. It's been 30 years. His room may be sort of the closest thing that he feels kind of having an attachment to is his constant. Jonathan also really enjoys his work as a guard for the bank. Again, the routine is just perfect. Every day he goes through the same opening and closing procedure. Perhaps maybe a doormat might be a better description of his job, because he found himself most of the time, it's just basically just standing stock still in those same 3 marble steps in front of the bank that sometimes he paced back and forth. And he thinks that by the time he retires, he would probably have spent 75,000 hours standing on those same marble steps, and probably the longest time that anyone has ever stood in one place. And he is just fine with that. Unfortunately for Jonathan, the carefully constructed, balanced, uneventful life is about to come tumbling down. One morning, he's getting ready for work, and he thought he would go to the bathroom beforehand. And whenever he needs to leave his room, he always makes sure that he take a listen to see if anyone is in the hallway, because he doesn't really want to bump into anyone or talk to anyone. Once he determines it's safe, he opens the door only to find a pigeon standing right outside his room in the hallway. And the pigeon has made quite a mess in the hallway also. Jonathan just freezes on the spot. And he looks at the pigeon, and you could see the pigeon's head is kind of tilted. It was like looking at Jonathan with his left eye. The eye that looks almost like this black center, a button that has been sewn on his head. The eye that looks like a lens of a camera that is lifeless, but yet is looking at you. It was absolutely terrifying for Jonathan. And Jonathan stumbled back into room. His heart starts beating. He feels like he's having a heart attack. And finally, when he calms down just a tiny little bit, he knows he has to go to work. He quickly grabs a suitcase. He just throws a bunch of stuff in it, and he narrowly escapes his room, just trying to avoid this pigeon. And from there, everything went wrong that day. First, it was the blunder at work. For the first time in his career, for 30 years as a guard, he misses the approach of the president's car. Usually, he can sense, he could feel the president's car is coming, and by the time the car arrives, he would have the gate open. But today, he didn't sense it because he was thinking so much about the pigeon. The car has to honk at him for him to open the door. The president probably didn't even notice it, but Jonathan was horrified at the mistake that he made. And from there, just the day, one thing after another, they may not seem like big things to you, but they are catastrophic for Jonathan. His entire life, his entire perfectly orderly life has been upended by this pigeon. The pigeon that he can't stop thinking about, the pigeon that he thinks he must have invaded my room by now. And the room is his whole world. He can't go back. This is his refuge. And the pigeon is probably making a mess inside his room. And I bet the pigeon has invited all his pigeon friends over, and now they're making a bunch of mess. And maybe they're going to make little pigeons. Oh no, what am I going to do? He can't go back. He can't go back to his room. What should he do? This is The Pigeon by Patrick Süskind, translated by John Yi Woods. Süskind is most famous for his novel Perfume, which I haven't read yet, but I will have to put that on my list. This is like the perfect novella. I feel like I might, like Fiona said, like I might have to take back what I said about novella before, because this is just perfect. It is just over 100 pages and it covers sort of that 24 hours in the life of Jonathan. And everything Jonathan imagines is so intense. And as a Pisces, I feel every single dread. I totally understand what you're going through. It doesn't matter what people think about pigeons. It's terrifying because I can totally feel how his thinking, his emotions, everything just spiral out of control. And I feel like this book totally speaks to that side of a Pisces. And it's quite funny. And it's just the way Süskind describes things is so good. I think this is a book for readers who want to, like just maybe not necessarily understand, like, how thoughts can spiral and how that works. But if you want a book that sympathize with how sometimes your thinking also spiral out of control, then I think this is a great book for that. It's also a book that has very, very keen observations on human behavior, and it described in such sharp sentences. I just really love the way he writes. And description of this sort of outsider who has chosen to sort of step back away, but yet he can't help. This pigeon just upends everything. So Fiona, perhaps chickens are not what you should be worrying about. Because as Süskind said, a pigeon is the epitome of chaos and anarchy. So if you're also looking for a short novella that has maybe just some terrifying things, or, I guess for a lot of people, I feel like maybe some of my book friends here, they'll just be like, it's just a pigeon, like who cares? But it is chaos and anarchy. So this is The Pigeon by Patrick Süskind, translated by John E. Woods.
Thank you so much, Virginia. I love that you described it as like you can fully feel his like spiraling. You can fully feel how paranoid and how like upset he is about this pigeon situation. I think that like empathy, that deep empathy is definitely a Pisces trait. I also did not expect 2 books about like paranoia and spiraling today. So I hope our readers are looking forward to that. I hope they want some books about delusion, because we definitely brought those. So thank you all so much for sharing your star sign picks today. Whether you identify with your sign or not, I hope you had a lot of fun learning a little bit more about it and reading a book that kind of fit the vibe of your star sign. I don't expect you to fully buy into it after doing this episode, but I certainly had a lot of fun recording it. So thank you guys for doing that with me. Other than that, I think that is all we have for you today. So thank you again, listeners, for listening to another episode of Keep It Fictional. I want to apologize to any earth signs listening. I apologize we had no earth sign representation today. But if you're a water sign, we got all 3 water signs here. We've got some fire, we got some air. So hopefully you got a recommendation from the books that we brought forward for you. And with that, we'll say goodbye and we'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening. If you like our show, please tell a fellow book lover about it. You can find a list of all the books we discussed in our show notes. Join us next week for another fun book chat. Until then, keep it fictional.